Welcome, treasure hunters, to another episode of the Lunch Table Podcast. In this episode, we will be reviewing Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, now out in theaters. If you haven't checked out our Indiana Jones Revisited, that is out now. Check it out. So, Akram, this is the final movie in the Indy series. This is Harrison Ford's last outing as Indy. What'd you think of it?
You know, it's bittersweet. I think it's a pleasure to see Otis Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. For some reason, it feels so iconic. Of course, it has to be with the plethora of films we've received. It's amazing. I think for the most part, this movie felt a little bit like Crystal Skull, but it was a little bit more darker in a sense, without getting into too much spoilers ahead. The ending was interesting. I'm not gonna spoil it, but the ending felt a little anticlimactic, I must admit, but it was fine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you on all those points. It feels like, well, it's James Mangold style, so if you guys watch Logan, it pretty much feels like this. It's a much darker tone than we've seen in other indie films, but nonetheless, it still has a lot of the charm and a lot of the wit that you'd expect from an Indiana Jones movie. It's just, it has this feeling of like, okay, it's the end. So it's like, we know it's, Indy's old already. I will admit, though, the beginning of the movie it felt like something out of like Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Last Crusade, because they had this big like train sequence and there's like a bunch of Nazis and stuff. It's actually one of my favorite like action sequences on a train, other than like Spider-Man 2, because it was just like so fun. And the CGI for young Indy looked really good too. But great cast of characters as well. We have Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena Shaw, and she's kind of like our supporting character in this movie. She plays, she's kind of like a thief, but also kind of like a historian too. What do you think of her performance?
No, I think Phoebe's always wonderful in whatever she is. She has that wit too. Sometimes she came off a little bit annoying here and there, and I don't know. I just sometimes where like she did was kind of tasteless. Especially towards the end, but for the most part, I think she was fine. She's not like a mutt, or I always call him short stick, short round. Yeah, but she's a fine, not kind of side character. She's definitely not like Marion Ravenhood or anything like that. She's okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought she was. Well, yeah, she did kind of come off as annoying sometimes, like how she kind of like. How her approach to archaeology, like she's more for like the money than she is for like saving history, like Indy. She's kind of like this almost like side antagonist. She's kind of like she reminded me of like Black Cat, like with Spider-Man. She's not the villain, but like she kind of like gets in the way sometimes.
Right, exactly.
We also had Mads Mikkelsen as Jürgen Voller. He's the main antagonist in this film. Another generic Nazi, unfortunately, but there's somewhat of a nuance to him. He's a guy he's kind of like a mathematician. He's more calculated, and he feels like he could do Hitler's job better than him. What do you think of his character?
Yeah, he's really calculating, and I think it's interesting because he has this goal that he's trying to accomplish, and through that you could kind of empathize. It's like, it's kind of weird to say it, but obviously he's with the Third Reich and he's trying to prolong the Third Reich. That's something you'd see in a lot of these things that are kind of like alternate histories and stuff. But when you actually delve into what he's trying to do, he made this his whole life's goal. And in a way, Indiana Jones has something similar. It's like archaeology and the adventure is his life goal as well. And they both share a common goal, which is trying, that involves the Dial of Destiny and the stuff that happens around that. So I think that his character it was okay. It was kind of like an archetypal villain, but I could see how some things they did with his character were really, it stands out than other characters in this type of setting, So
yeah, it's like almost weird. It's like he's kind of like a foil for Indy in a way. Like they're two men from history, and this movie takes place like I think like during 1969 with the moon landing. So it's like Indy's in this age of rock and roll and revolution. Everybody's like younger around him. And he feels like almost like out of time. He's almost like himself, like a relic or like an artifact from like a bygone era too. So it was sad because it's like I said in the Revisited, it's like Indy's like fighting time as well as villains too. He's he's almost like a fossil. Right? It's sad to see him like people don't appreciate archaeology as much, and it's somewhat talks about like appreciating history in a way. Like there's this kind of lost interest in like history because everybody thinks like the future is like the next big thing, right? But in a way, it kind of talks about like history repeats itself too, right?
Yeah. And I always felt like that was really cool from all the Indiana Jones movies. So in that sense, you feel like continuity. We talked about the Revisited, how each film is kind of distinct in its own way, rather than just like this continuous thing. And then, what did you think of Boyd Holbrook? He's been in a lot of things, huh? Like his character.
That dude will play a henchman for a can of Chef Boyd. He dude, he might as well have been the villain from Logan, without the robot.
Right, exactly.
I mean, he was fine. I mean, he was as our friend Jerome, the run of the mill villain. He didn't have too much of a big role, so he's kind of just like Voller's lieutenant here. Is like this new age like Aryan Nazi guy. There was other great characters too. We also, of course, John Rhys-Davies came back as Sulla. He was in the trailer too. I thought it was cool bringing him back. It feels like one of Indy's friends came back to make a cameo too. We also have Ethann Isidore as Teddy. He's kind of like the short round of this movie too. He's like this plucky sidekick too. So. Oh, and Antonio and Banderas apparently made like a appearance in this film. I didn't expect that too. So it has every element you'd expect from an Indiana Jones movie. It just feels like it feels a little. It's kind of like you said, like Crystal Skull. It feels like more nuanced. It has kind of this almost bigger budget cinematic quality than you'd expect from the other films, but. I think it was a nice conclusion to Indy's story because in this film he kind of has this falling out with Marion Ravenwood. I think after Crystal Skull, I don't know if Crystal Skull is still canon now, but Mutt and Marion are still part of his family, and he has this big falling out with Marion. But it was nice to see that they kind of mended their relationship a bit in this movie too. But do you think this is a appropriate conclusion for Indy's story, and what do you think of Harrison Ford himself?
Yeah, no, Harrison Ford again. Harrison Ford's always great. It wasn't an appropriate ending. I don't know. It's something I'd prefer. I'd prefer an ending like this as opposed to another one, because it was left sort of open ended. I think that's a lot more digestible rather than something more aggressive, an aggressive approach to ending it. So I'm glad in a way they kind of ended it like that because it eased my mind. But at the same time too, I can understand why it may seem lackluster to some people. So, but I felt comfortable. I think a lot of people feel comfortable the way how it ended. Yeah. What about you? What did you think?
Yeah, it was a comfortable. I think it was kind of a safe ending too. They kind of made it seem like towards the end, like Indy was gonna go out with a bang or something, or he was gonna have this heroic, noble ending. But I like how they kind of did it. It was like he could finally be at peace, right? He could enjoy his life, instead of like they always say, like the next big adventure in life is like settling down, right? So maybe for Indy, that's the main goal. I don't know. It sounds corny.
I know that sounds like in a brochure. Right? That's true. That's true. I guess. Yeah. Or unless they just bring the old bastard in an alleyway and be done with it already.
This got so dark.
Yeah. Be fast of it. Don't let him suffer. Right.
Do what you need with him and broom him fast.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you had for this, and how would you rate this movie?
This is my first Indiana Jones film seeing it as an adult in the theater, so it was kind of surreal because you have these big names and this big franchise, and you're finally seeing the conclusion. So it felt special in some ways, personally at least. I think the movie could have been a lot better. This has the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score, I think, to date for Indiana Jones. So for sure, I could see that it could have been finessed a little bit better, because it is the final film for Indy. But we'll see in the future if they pick up with Young Indiana Jones, Disney Plus or something. Watch that happen, mark my words. So at a 1 to 10, I honestly would give this movie probably a 7 out of 10. What would you rate it?
I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10 as well. I think it kind of unfortunately suffers from franchisal curse, I guess, if you want to say. Like, we've seen all these other franchises try to kind of milk the cash cow, and I think this was another unfortunate instance of that, where they try to say, oh well, Indy's a successful franchise, let's pump another movie out. But I think nonetheless, I think it's still tasteful in a way, and it has like everything I'd expect from an Indy movie. It has like a lot of culture, a lot of fun, a lot of great chase and car sequences and action. I think it's a really fun movie. I think it's great for the kids as well. Great family film. So 7 out of 10 for me.
Cool. All right. Well, why don't you take us away, Indy?
All right. Well, the guys, thank you so much for tuning in for this review. Check out our Indiana Jones Revisited if you're a big fan of the franchise as well. We do plenty of content, plenty of reviews. Akram just put out a Last of Us update video recently, so if you guys are fans of Last of Us, check that out as well. Follow us wherever you follow the podcast and let us know how we're doing. But guys, thank you so much. Until then, thanks for having lunch with us.
See you guys. Keep swinging with a whip, or keep whipping. Maybe that's not good to say. Bye-bye.